Hey, you're listening to the Burnt Out Entrepreneur podcast, where you'll learn why you're feeling so burnt out, some insights and hacks to get you along this entrepreneurial journey. I'm Kylie Yota, former oil and gas manager turned health coach, life coach, and business mentor for female entrepreneurs just like you, and help them heal and recover from burnout. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Burnt Out Entrepreneur. Today I'm here with Lisa Zawrotny. She is the founder of Positively Productive Systems and the host of Positively Living podcast. And obviously, she's a productivity and accountability coach for people like us who we're talking about ADHD a little bit earlier too. And, for us who are multi-passionate and have a lot of things going on, she is the coach that you need to kind of help bring it all in and just help get you on the right track, help you better with your productivity, and like give you that accountability for, I'm talking to you popular archetypes who maybe have ADHD, maybe have like a lot going on, a lot of ideas, but not a lot of execution energy. Lisa is the coach for you. So today we're going to be talking about energy management, right? Especially for the creative entrepreneurs who we don't know what to do. We're like, oh, I'm running around with a chicken, like a chicken without our heads. And I like that, Lisa has created a special niche for this type of entrepreneur or even just type of person, because we need that grounding. We need that stability. And I also like that she has, positive psychology and stress management in her programs, because especially for people like us, the popular archetypes, where we've probably been chastised, we've probably been berated, we've probably been told, like, if you're not conforming to societal standards, then you're wrong. So I like that she incorporates positive psychology into her systems and her programs. And I'm just going off about you, Lisa, but tell us more about yourself and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Kylie. I love what you're saying. It means so much to me because I've lived it too. Hello, fellow multi-passionate, loving all the things, having all the ideas, also having been through burnout, actually multiple times. This is not one of those things where you're like, oh, it's happened once and then we're done. No, life, oh my goodness, it comes at you. But you've pretty much hit the important high points. Yeah, a productivity strategist and accountability coach, because we need to start redefining what productivity actually is. And that's so important to me. And on the personal side of things, when I'm not helping those multi-passionates of mine boost productivity and reduce all that overwhelm without sacrificing what they love. So that's key, right? But I'm paying attention to what I love. I'm walking my own talk and I'm hanging out with my husband and kiddos, and I'm either acting like a rock star, and I mean that, we have a family band,
Oh
or
my
watching movies with them, or maybe hiding out from everyone. And my favorite way to do that would be with a good book and an iced coffee. And then I'm likely trapped under a cat at that point. So those are like my my sort of two big zones to be in.
Yeah, I'm usually trapped under a dog. We just got a puppy recently. She'll be a year old next week. And oh my
Oh.
gosh, she's the cutest thing. But right before getting onto the show, you know how things happen, right? It's like, oh, she found the chopstick. I was in the dishwasher grabbing something. She got a chopstick and started running around with it. You know, life,
Yep.
life.
Exactly. That's life. But then also those pets of ours, as crazy as they might be, are a great example of, you talk about, I love that you use the word grounding, and I do really believe in being a grounding force for my clients, for my friends, for anyone who hangs out with me. And I also think that our pets are definitely grounding to us, and they're a great example of something that brings us so much for energy management that we're talking about today.
Yes, yes. And I mean, energy management, especially when we're talking about burnout, is the one thing. And I've talked about this on a previous episode where I call it the PEMS framework, and it's just literally physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. I love acronyms, and that's the easiest way that I could come with to remember the four, but it's just the four different aspects of energy. when
Mhm.
relating it to our humanness, right? So physical energy, a lot of times people think like, oh, I'm physically burnt out, so therefore now I'm in burnout. It's like, no, you probably had some kind of trauma, some kind of emotional trigger, or maybe like too much mental stress at work or even in your business. It's like, like those. And I know for me that that's what happened, right? I was in a narcissistic abusive relationship. I had to deal with the aftermath of that. The divorce was horrible. And then I was dealing a lot, like I was working like 60 to 70 hours a week at my corporate job on top of everything else. And then my kids had to go to therapy. It was like everything, like all the PEMS, PEMS, everything. And like spiritually, like I'm a Christian, so like getting a divorce even was affecting my spiritual energy and like that part of my value system. So I was like bombarded on all four of these levels. And then I got the diagnosis that I was in burnout. And I didn't realize I was burnt out until I got remarried. And my husband was like, something's wrong with you. You keep falling asleep. And like anytime I would sit down, I kid you not, like I could be sitting here, like just on the computer, like, and he's like, something's wrong with you. Like, why do you fall asleep every time that you sit down? Like, like, do you have insomnia? Like maybe you have narcolepsy, like something's wrong, go to the doctor, get checked out. Then, we did a whole host of testing. Luckily, I had found a naturopath before all of this happened. So I actually got a good diagnosis. And all of that to say, there's way more than just physical energy when we're dealing with energy management. And like I have a four-prong system. Lisa has her own four-prong system called the 4Ds, and I'm so excited for you to share that with the audience today.
No, I'm excited to share it as well. And to your point about the different kinds of energy that we have, how they constantly play with each other, affect each other. So you can leverage them in a good way, and you also have to pay attention to them in a way that isn't serving you. So I think that's so important because I can see so many times, especially through the productivity lens, where there's a certain weariness that we have, right? Maybe it's an emotional weariness because we're in relationships where we're struggling. And so what's the first thing we do? Well, we try to be productive in other ways, right? And that ultra productivity, by the way, is a trauma response, and it's an understandable one. It's a place where you have control, right? And a place where you can do something maybe that you do feel like it lights you up, but it's a band-aid on top of a really deep wound. So yeah,
Yeah.
paying attention to how these connect and play together and work together, also affect each other. That's so important. And then the good news is you can continue to have them affect and you can leverage them, like I said, in a really positive way as well. Like we talk about productivity and getting enough sleep and getting enough to eat, and women who have a cycle, that's going to affect, right, their energy. And that's just the physical energy, not to mention the the mental side of it. And hi,
Yeah.
I'm living through perimenopause right now, so that's like a what's today gonna bring kind of
I'm almost there with you. I'm almost there with you.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, all this to say is that the more that we're curious about that, and the more that we see where our energy is not only coming from, but where it's going to, and how each of these things connect, the better off we'll be, because you can make adjustments and from a beautiful, self-compassionate place, know that you are deserving of what you need.
Yeah.
And then that's where brilliant, happy, positive productivity comes from.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Like, oh, that's such a good breakdown of what you do. Oh gosh. Okay. So, um, the 4Ds, I think, I don't know. I think my people that follow me, because they probably love the acronyms, they probably love
Yeah.
the steps. And I think for the most part, a lot of the creative entrepreneurs are always looking for steps
Hmm.
because we feel like, oh, well, if just had the steps, if someone just tell me what to do, like I could probably harness all of this creative energy and channel it into some kind of focused energy block here. But for the life of me, they feel like they can't.
Yeah. I think when you are in overwhelm, especially being able to say, okay, what's the next right thing to do? Or,
Yeah.
just having some kind of thing that can reduce the scope, because overwhelm, can come from having too much, but it can also come from not knowing what's next. Because you can have the space and the time and even the energy to do something, but when you're like, oh, but well, do I do this or do I do that? And then you have, confusion and decision fatigue. I mean, there's a lot going on. So yeah,
Oh
let's
my gosh.
simplify it, but let's start with what the challenge is. And so the 4D framework, actually, before we talk about that, I'll just mention
Yeah.
quickly, since you are like all about the acronyms, as am I. When originally talking about clutter in our lives, I want to identify, just so we know, clutter. Peter Walsh has a great quote about this, that it's not just the stuff on the floor, but anything that gets in between, you and the life that you want to live, any of the
Mhm.
blocks that are in your life. So we want to think about it in those terms. And I actually created the S.I.M.P.L.E system, S.I.M.P.L.E. And there's a way to find out what that simple system is for free. So I have resources about that. But the whole idea is that it's asking the right questions to actually create your own framework. And that's the driving point here, is that you are different from anyone else. So take the framework and make sure you're applying it to you. Now, moving on to the 4Ds, I was originally all about the fact that you have too much to do, right? That too many things on your task list. And so what we want to do is step back and say, is your task list or your to-do list really your to-do list? What's going on there? Let's make some sense of it and then figure out what steps you want to take to process it.
Yeah.
So the first thing that's not even in the 4Ds, but it's a way to prepare for the 4Ds, is when you do a mind sweep, right? Or a brain dump, or whatever you want to call it. And that's a good thing to do, because you don't want the stuff in your brains. David Allen, he uses the frame, a mind sweep. He says, your brains aren't for holding the information, they're for creating. And you're an innovator, right? And you love to create. So you want to have as much space, right, as possible, to be able to think through and to troubleshoot and to innovate. And so trying to hold on to information, that is a form of mental clutter that's happening, where you're like, oh, but wait, I have to do that other thing. And you're constantly being pulled in different directions. So
Right.
make sure to take it all out, put it down. But, and this is key. So listen, lean in here. I'm going to tell you something critical. That what you just took out of your brain is not your to-do list. It is
Mm.
your to choose list. It is your to process list, to figure out what's going on. That is what was taking your attention. It is now in a safe space that's referred to as capturing. Great. It will be there. It will be there waiting for you. Now you can figure out what's going on there, what kind of categories you have like in common with each other, what's coming up a lot, what is an obvious priority, all that kind of stuff. So then you take your to-do list. Well, okay, that would be a beautiful way to do it. But right now you probably are like, I have this to-do list. It's like a mile long. It's like there's a Harry Potter like extension charm on it, and I don't know how to stop it. The 4Ds will help you. So whichever angle you can come from, we're going to do this. And the first thing, and this is why we had to talk about decluttering, the first D is to delete.
Ooh.
And here's the thing, you will probably hear other systems out there, 3Ds, 4Ds, there are many. While this is not new information, what's really important is that the order in which I do this will help you be as efficient as possible and use the least amount of energy to get the furthest. That's what's key, right? So deleting, you don't want to list what you don't intend to do. So you have to ask yourself, what doesn't belong? Maybe what's lingering. You want to check for things that are outdated or maybe obligations from someone else. I'm sure you can look at your list right now and be like, that seemed like a good idea at the time, or maybe it was someone else's idea and you're like, you put it down because you love to help.
Yeah,
Well,
I call that
right?
OPP, other people's problems.
Oh my gosh. OPP. Yeah, you know me.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yes. So it's really time to ask, to question everything. Look at each of these things and say, does this really belong here? Truly. And here's why. You know already. I don't even have to tell you this, but I'm going to remind you how frustrating it is to have that list and you see that task follow you. Oh, I'm going to create a new list now. I'm going to like start fresh piece of paper or fresh, like task management list or a checklist wherever you are. I'm going to start a new one and you transfer it over and that that's an energy drain right there, right? Because you're like, I'm just now at this point, you're like, it's like a pet. I'm just keeping it here. Why is this here? So I want you
Yeah.
to ask very, very clearly, like, why is this still here? And then if it's a yes, we can figure out some more things with the other D's. And if it's a no, you can bless and release. And it's okay if it made sense before, but it doesn't now. You get to choose that.
Yeah. Sometimes I like going in a sauna and like, oh, let me just check that off because I'm not doing it.
Yep. Yeah. Check it or delete it, remove it somehow. All right. Second D now is delegate. And so this is where you ask the question in this very specific way. You look at the thing and you go, how can this get done? How can it get done? And you'll notice, even though I'm an English major and I was always taught, don't use the passive voice, I am now. And here's why. We want to keep your mind open for the creative process of saying, oh, I don't have to be the one to do it. It just
Yeah.
needs to get done. So how could that be? What would that look like? Could I pay someone? Could I find someone who could do it for free? Could I find a someone? Or could I find a technology that might be able to do it? You can automate things, It's like, oh,
Yes.
I need to do a follow up with my clients and I keep forgetting. And now I feel awful because it's late and you automate that. And now that's one less thing that is on your plate.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
So that's the delegating part where you're like, how can it get done? And you don't have to be the one to do it. Now, the next thing, if whatever you have left that you're like, no, I need to be the one to do it, at least at this point in the process. The next one, the third D is delay. So here's it doesn't necessarily have to be a someday, but it's also a not now. Not everything you have needs to be done immediately. Remember, when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And then
Right.
that's where you are just, in a cluster and you're not getting anywhere and your wheels are spinning, right? So when you don't remove or delegate something and you have what's left, you have to figure out what you can defer until you have the energy and the space, right, in your life to handle it. And sometimes also too, it's because it is not a priority. This is especially true with the innovators. Okay. When you're like, ooh, I want to try this. Ooh, I have a new idea. Oh, that would be amazing.
Right.
And you have to realistically say, okay, great, but I'm going to revisit that in 3 months or 2 weeks or whatever feels good to you. Or if it's a someday kind of thing, it feels someday-ish, you can put it in your calendar to be like, sit down and rethink this potential $1 million idea that I had, the third one today, mind you, in 6 months from now. You can put it on your calendar and remind yourself to look at it again. But here's the brilliance. When you take it out of what I call your prime real estate, that's, your
Yeah.
current task list, right? Your current calendar, the things that are going to be reminding you every day of what you're not getting done, when they sit there and they languish, they create frustration and guilt
Yeah.
and they get in the way of finding the things you need. That's the whole concept of clutter, right? That's all the things that it does. So we're not saying you don't get to do it. We're just saying, what bandwidth do you have realistically? And if you don't have that bandwidth right now, be honest, it's okay. You can revisit it later. And doing that intentionally is such a different energy and emotion of saying, not yet. In a month, I'm looking at it, and then it's removed. It still has the same effect of not being on your to-do list, but it's completely different because you got to choose. You got to do it intentionally as opposed to, oh, I didn't get to that yet.
Yeah, and I think too, when we're talking about doing something intentionally, I think a lot of the people listening may be struggling with the permission based,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yep.
oh, well, can I not? And like once we own our autonomy, because a lot of us probably have been controlled as children, especially the super creative ones, to tone it down. Like, you're a little too much right now. And for them, having to tone it down, I think this kind of feels like the same thing to them, because I have clients where like, that's a lot. And I can feel some of them getting offended that,
Mm-hmm.
we're putting the brakes on something, but like, but, and I could see their inner child kind of like rising up, like, well, you can't, I'm the client. So they're not saying that out loud, but it's like kind of like I'm the client, like this is what I want to work on. And it's like, well, but that's completely different than what you wanted to work on last week. So like,
Yeah, you do have the permission to change your mind and to decide that. But ultimately, it's like, how does it connect to your greater goal and what are you trying to achieve? So, do you get to change your mind? 100%. Yes, you do. I want you to think of it more as, let's say you had a set of projects. Think of it physically, because sometimes when we think of it that way, it's easier to when it's tangible, I think it's easier to visualize. Let's say you have, those cool plastic bins, right? With, different kinds of projects in them. We're not saying you have to get rid of the bin. The bin has to go. You're not supposed to have the bin. What's wrong with you for having so many bins, right?
right.
I'm on a soapbox here saying, no, have as many bins as you want because that's you and it's what lights you up. But we are saying that realistically, it can be very challenging, especially depending upon the space you have. And that space now represents not only the physical space, but it represents the amount of time, the amount of ability to focus, that you can't have that many of these projects out at one time.
Yeah.
Because now all the pieces, parts, let's say it's a puzzle or one's an arts and crafts project of some kind where you have, I don't know, popsicle sticks and glue, no glitter. Absolutely.
No glitter. Oh my
I'm
gosh.
like, I can't handle the glitter, but that no. Hey, no, if you love glitter, you do you, boo. But my point is that now things can start to get like intermingled. You know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, it becomes harder to do the project. It becomes just more cluttered. And when that happens, you don't get the benefit of each of those projects. So if you think about it in those terms, it's really simply saying that's in a bin. Let's put that on the highest shelf right now and we'll get to it as soon as you're ready. You grab the ladder, you go get that bin, you bring it down. But it's sitting there giving you space for you to be able to focus better. And that's the whole point, right? That is productivity. It's being fully focused and being clear and being able to see something through from point A to point whatever. I mean, it can
Yeah.
be A to T or A to Z or, A to Q. It does not matter. You get to choose, but it can be really important for your focus. Now, what I'm describing too is also the idea of projects that are sequential versus simultaneous. And so there are some projects, some things that you can do simultaneously,
Yeah.
but you also have limits. What if you are in a point in time in your life where you are grieving? What if you are in a point in time where you are healing from trauma, which we all are to some point, right? When you and I were originally chatting, big T, little t, we all have it. So compassion to ourselves. What if it's not only these projects, but it's other things you want to be doing? It's not always about the business or about the doing things. Sometimes it's simply enjoyment for enjoyment's sake, fun and joy in your life. And there is an element of making time. I don't like to talk about, quote, time management, but we do have specific resources in our lives of our energy and our time. So it's like, what gets to be in there?
Yeah.
The good news is you always get to choose. The bad
Yes.
news is we can't always do everything we want all at once, all at the same time. But the best news is you can make the time when you choose and you move things around with that full permission and that understanding that you're working the best way for you.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to that time versus energy thing
Mm-hmm.
because, right, we could be sitting here and like you have an hour blocked out, but you don't have the energy
Mm-hmm.
to get into whatever. And you're like, ah, like, I'm supposed to be doing X right now, but I'm not feeling it. So, like, are you even going to get any of that done? Like, how much energy is it going to take for you to, like, okay, muster up the energy?
Yeah.
And then, like, when you get down to it, like, I only had really 20 minutes of active work that I was doing it. So, like, I like what you say. It's like, it's not about time management because it's not like a switch where we're like, oh, I need to do social media right now. Right? And you're not going to take the whole hour, or you're not going to have the whole hour with active work. It's like energy, flows the way that it goes. And sometimes you feel like it, sometimes you don't. And we have to honor our energy patterns.
Yeah,
It
and
can
they
be the
can
most
vary,
productive.
right, from day to day. We talked about this earlier, depending upon what's going on, depending upon, the night's sleep you had for your physical energy. But I'll give you another great example of energy management in terms of, how it feeds into your motivation and your ability to get the job done, to do the thing. My
Yeah.
kids, case in point, struggle to clean their room. And it cracks me up because I used to be a professional organizer. I'm like, seriously, people would see you and be like, I don't know about her. But hey, moms get it, where you can be like, I do this thing, I help others do this thing. My kids are like, whatevs. So, I mean, they've struggled and struggled. And it's like, can you please do this? And, they try or whatever. But then as soon as it's like, oh, I have a chance to go hang out with my friends. Great. As soon as your room is clean, whoa, that was a world record.
Right.
20 minutes later, the room is pristine. And you're like, you had it in you all along. But there was that motivator. So that's a
Yeah.
great example of something that boosts energy. And I mean, I'm not immune. As soon as someone's like, we'll go out for ice cream, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get
Yay.
her done,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great example of energy. So it's funny. I had a keynote address where I went through the 4 Ds, and we did exactly this, is where we went through the first 3 Ds because they're so important. And then finally someone shouted out, what's the fourth D? So I want to make sure we get the fourth D because
Yeah.
someone's listening right now and being like, what's the fourth D? So we had delete, delegate, and delay, right? And this is a way to like create that space and that breathing room on your task list. The fourth D, you might expect it, drum roll please, is do. Now, finally, after those first three, it's time to take action. Now we can prioritize. Now we can figure out what can you do quickly? What can you do that will make everything else potentially easier, right? Your life easier. That's a good way to prioritize. And now we can start applying all the classic productivity techniques that you can think
Yeah.
of, right? The batch processing and the Pomodoro technique where you're doing sprints and like paying attention to how you get into flow, which is one of your most productive states, like you're talking about when you have
Yeah.
this hour to work on social media and what do you do to set yourself up for success. But do you see how those first three make such a difference in what's really left to do, what's really and truly your task list?
Yeah. So, speaking of puzzles, like my husband does puzzles
Yep.
and he spends the majority of his time separating all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
He separates them by color, texture, whatever, and he can get 1,000-piece puzzle done in a day. But he spends a lot of that prep time up front, and next thing you know, he's like do 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 do, and like he's like going at it. And the further along that he gets, right, the more pieces he has connected.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it gets easier because then you can see where things actually fit. that's the analogy that came up to me. I was like, oh yeah, that's because I'm like, how in the world do you do, because it keeps him busy. Like he has days off. He's a shift worker. So when I'm here doing podcast or whatever, he's like, waiting for me to be done with work. And I'm like, I come in the office. I'm like, okay, blah blah blah, and then I go back out. I'm like, how did you like? You're halfway done. And he's like, oh yeah. And then I started talking to him about the process
Hmm.
because I get frustrated. I'm not a puzzle person. And he's like, no, you separate first, and then you look, and he tells me his strategy. I'm like,
You
oh,
create the frame, you look for the corner pieces, right? You create the frame. What you're talking about is what I call priming your productivity, doing that work ahead of time that we'd love to skip because again, anytime you have to do something that feels like effort, right? But it changes the game once you get into it. Similar concept that I talk about and work with my clients is what tools do you need to do the job? So if it's social media management that you're doing, then you need to have potentially Canva up and you need to have your list of posts that you're going to do. And I love using like Google Docs and things like that. So I have all those up in terms of, where's my schedule? What am I planning? What am I setting up? Or, what am I setting up to delegate? Even that, it's still a task, but you're pulling stuff together to prime your productivity to make it easier. Chefs, right, in restaurants and kitchen staff in restaurants
yeah,
have this. You have mise en place, which is everything in its place, right? You have sous chefs who prepare and chop everything and then you cook. Now, I know at home we might chop and then cook and saute and whatever. But again, when you look at the most efficient places like a restaurant, they are setting everything up first and then going through the process, and it makes it that much faster. And part of that is there are fewer decisions to make in the moment. You make all the big
yes,
decisions. Your decision fatigue is a real thing, right? Because it's a lot of work and effort. You do that up front. And then when you get into the process, you can get into the flow that much faster because it's less about the decisions and more about the doing.
yeah. No, I love that you said that because I am not a mise en place cooker. My dad is.
Uh huh.
I make his recipe, and he's like, no. Like, it tastes the same. It doesn't, but some of the times the bacon gets burnt, and the hot dog is his baked beans recipe is
Mm-hmm.
super popular. The bacon's burnt, the hot dogs aren't like all cooked at the same rate, and I'm like, it's okay. It tastes the same, but the quality that my dad produces is way different than mine. I get the job done
Mm-hmm.
because I'm hungry and like I want that quick hit. Like I only have 30 minutes to cook dinner. So, I try to rush the process.
Mm-hmm.
But with my dad, he preps, he does his mise en place and he's like, okay. He cooks the bacon, puts it in a dish. I'm like, ooh, more dishes, so my brain just works differently than my dad's. And he has a house painting business or a commercial painting business. And 80% is all prep work. He'll
There you
go
go.
like, you know, patch any holes, take care of any mold. And that's why people always hire him or rehire him, his repeat clients, because they understand his attention to detail. Because they're like, why would I hire someone to paint my house when I can just do it myself? When he comes in and they see the attention to detail that he has, he's not just slapping paint on a wall. He's like looking at everything, and then like he's like, putting the paint on the wall, that's the easy part. You're not paying me to put paint on your wall. You're paying me to do the prep work and give you a nice finished product. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I'm thinking about it because I've painted a number of walls, and including the ones behind me, which are like a really deep tone. And the biggest work was taping out like the trim work and stuff like that. And that's something to take with you. Now, I want to be clear. So using the cooking as an example, you can make a perfectly good meal and do, one step at a time as you go. It's not always going to be like, well, it didn't come out all that great. it's a choice, and it's a choice in terms of if you are there and you have the time and it doesn't matter to you so much and you're enjoying the journey of it and you're just puttering. Like, there are times when we do like to putter and it's not about being productive, but that's again going to be a choice. I know for me, I do cook for my family very regularly, but it's got to be like a tight 10, so to speak. Like, I don't have a lot of time to do it and I want to do
Yeah.
it well. So there's definitely prep work involved, and it makes life a lot easier. And by the way, here's a quick tip. If you do have like the stuff that you're prepping ahead of time, if you have a big enough and easily washable cutting board, you start with things like, you go from like vegetables to meats. So
Yeah.
you start with the veggies and you chop that, and you can leave them right there on the cutting board. And then the last thing you do is the bacon. So you have everything there prepped. It's still only one thing to wash. So ask me how I know.
Yeah, totally. Or even when, I was really big into meal prepping, like you cut everything and you try to like, okay, how can I use all of these carrots? And then you can craft a menu around like the ingredients that you have. Like, then it was too much for me. I'm like, okay, this meal prepping thing is like, well, then I got married, okay? I'll just say it. Then I got married and we had to combine like different taste buds, and then like,
Mhm.
we don't like the same things in the kitchen. So like, okay, you kind of let that go to the wayside. But for me, I like so my meal prepping plan right now is I just put things on the calendar. It's just a 30-day calendar. Decision fatigue. I decide up
Mhm.
front according to, because I said my husband works a shift working schedule. So if he's on a night shift, I have to cook in the afternoon before he goes to work. Like, I don't cook at a normal dinner cooking time. So I'm like, okay, what's easy to do on these days? And some days we don't feel like eating that, and that's fine. But at least the majority of the decision has been made up front. And in the moment, we get to choose, like, oh, I don't really feel like eating that right now. It's like, okay, well, we have these other options because, whatever's scheduled for the week, scheduled for the week, I'm using air quotes. You can pick from any of these because I have all the ingredients for any of these things that are listed for the week. And he's like, oh, okay. And my husband is very big on eating in the moment, if that makes sense. He's like, what do I feel like eating right now? Like, you feel like eating that because that's on the calendar today.
Exactly. Did you plan for it? No. Well, then guess what you're feeling like? You're feeling like whatever I made for you.
Yeah,
That's my kids. You get what you get, and they just chime in, and you don't get upset.
yeah. Or I'm like, okay, you're big, you have a car, you can go buy whatever you want to eat if
Right.
you don't feel like it.
Full permission. Whoever does the planning, anyone else can change their mind, but they got to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. This is so fun. Oh man. And I like how you said, right, the 3Ds before you do that final D. A lot of times when we're feeling the overwhelm, I feel like we're in that four, just the
Mhm.
do, without taking inventory ahead of time. And like Lisa's saying, it's not gonna take you forever and a day to just sit down. Like, this could be what, 5 to 10 minutes, just brain dump. And then look at your list, okay? The first 3Ds, right? Okay, delete. Like, I don't want to do this, or this is OPP. It belongs to somebody else. And then the other like two, like, oh, delegate. I don't want to do this. Maybe someone else can do it. Or maybe, like you said, get an app that could do it. Some kind of tech or some kind of automation that could do it. Like, you don't have to be sending out contracts all the time. Like, you can set up a Zap and have the Zap do it for you. So many different ways to automate things and delegate things. People, when I talk about delegation to some of my clients, they're like, I can't hire anyone right now. Like, no, you don't have to hire. You could get a $20 app that could do it for you, or something, or even like look at your current systems, whatever tech you have. Like, I'm sure you're probably not using it to the 100% capacity. Could find some kind of built-in like native integration to get the job done instead of feeling like you have to do everything manually, you
Oh,
know?
absolutely. And AI can be a
Oh,
big help now because you have to be very careful. There are certain areas, at least I firmly believe, we want to step carefully
yeah.
because we have copyright concerns and things like that. But when it comes to ideation, when it comes to organizing, summarizing, things like that, it can do a lot of heavy lifting for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Y'all would be surprised how much I use AI in producing this podcast because it's like, why would I not?
Right.
Um, and then the last one you said delay, right? We don't have to do everything right now. Sometimes it feels like we have all these open loops going. And I know for me personally, like there's just this open loop and that open loop, like, or there's just different things pulling at you and taking up bandwidth. It's like I call it like having all of the tabs open on your computer.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wait. But like you said, when you're in a project mode, if you're doing social media, I only need Canva up. I probably need Google Docs or Google Sheets, however you're doing it, and maybe a scheduling app if you're using that. And then like not necessarily have to shut everything down, but move those active tabs to a different window, something like that. So
Yeah.
that's all you're seeing is this mise en place of apps or like of tabs open, right? It's like, this is what I'm working on. This is the meal that I'm creating right now. Okay, I'm just gonna focus on this. I love that. I love that you did all of that. So uh, is there anything else that you want to leave with the audience before we get into how they can get your simple framework?
I think maybe it would be my one of my favorite quotes, or it'll be a paraphrase if I didn't quite get the quote right, but it's from Sophia Bush, which is that you are allowed to be a work in progress and a masterpiece simultaneously.
Yes.
And so you're here listening and you're like, oh, how can I pour into myself? How can I do this a little bit better? How can I, uh, just make improvements? That's a beautiful thing. So pat yourself on the back for that, because that is a wonderful thing to be in that growth mindset and to be willing to look. But I also want you to celebrate where you are at this point. I want you to celebrate how creative and innovative you are, that you're like, I'm overwhelmed with all of the awesome ideas I have. What do I do? That's amazing, right? And that's a superpower. So celebrate that as well. And I think that's so important as we go. It's not about what's wrong with us. It's about what more right can we find in our worlds, that suits us, that fits us, and that helps us live, the best way possible.
Oh my gosh, I love that. My takeaway from that is I am a masterpiece in the making.
You're a masterpiece already, and then you're even more of a masterpiece on the
Right.
way, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I like that, like, we're not wrong. I feel like with the big T's and the little T traumas that we've experienced, some of that has been like we've been made to be wrong because of like maybe we're just different from our parents,
Yeah.
you know? And I love that, you're a professional organizer, yet your children do not have that skill, but you never made them wrong for not, and I've
No.
made my I've made my kids wrong for not being like me because I was a young parent. I didn't know what I was doing, and then but now on the other side of the mountain, we're doing cleanup, we're healing, I'm explaining to them, and they're it's been this whole healing journey that
Oh,
we've been
sure.
on.
My kids have learned so much in the way of grief and trauma from me. I can't make them be able to function in the same way that I do, and I wouldn't want that. And
Yeah.
also, too, I can see the beauty in who they are. I told you earlier that it's a sea of ADHD in my house, but you know what else it is? It's a sea of creativity. And
Yeah.
those two are like, one is an artist and a musician, the other one is a musician and an artist, and they are far more incredible than I think I will ever be, no matter how much I practice. And I love that for them. So we all have our gifts, we have our strengths and our weaknesses, and they're both, right? Their weaknesses are strengths, strengths are weaknesses, and it's just part of who we are. And the more that we embrace that and lean into it, the better.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good note to end this episode on. Yeah, so Lisa, just tell us like where we can find out more about you and how we can get parts of your framework.
Sure thing. Well, you can start right away with the worksheets that I use with my clients. And there's even a checklist for, the decluttering with the simple system, all the stuff that we talked about, things like the joy list, even a focus file to help you mind sweep, and all of that is right on my homepage of my website, positivelyproductive.com. And then there are upgrades, like there's a vault where there's videos and things like that go with this stuff. But for free, you can get it right there. Of course, you're listening to an amazing podcast, and I'd love it if you'd come join me over at mine, Positively Living. We talk about all these things as well. And then if you are looking to just have a good laugh, including today, where I definitely hyped up naps in a big way, I do a lot of really funny, ridiculous reels. That's good stress management for me and you over at Instagram, and that's positively_Lisa. And I'd love it if you'd come play with me there.
Oh my gosh. If you're not going to check her out, I am, because that's like right up my alley. Before we hopped on, or before we pressed record today, she and I were talking, and right, one of your strengths is humor.
Yep.
Like, yes, that's why we're like this, because I love humor. Yeah. So, oh my gosh. Thank you again, Lisa, for sharing your framework with us. The 4Ds are so awesome, and I can't wait for people to tap into all the other resources that you have on your website, and even like checking out your Instagram and watching those reels, because I know, right? Using humor to diffuse some of the things that we've been caught up in and trapped in or whatever, it really helps with the integration process and understanding ourselves and just saying like, hey, life happens, but we can be positive about it and we can be productive.
Oh, I love that. What a beautiful way to say that. And thank you so much for your hospitality and letting me share the things that matter to me. And I truly hope they help.
Yes. So thank you again for listening, and I hope you come again next week for another episode of the Burnt Out Entrepreneur Podcast. See you guys next. Did you enjoy this episode? Want more? Here are a few ways to go deeper. Number one, discover your burnout archetype. You always hear me talking about this on each and every single episode. So get ready to crack the code on your personal burnout style. Take the quiz, go to burnedoutarchetypequiz.com and open up your mind to explore new ways on how to manage stress and conquer challenges according to your personality type. Number two, work with me. I will be your personal burnout recovery coach, because we're not just talking about change. We're talking about a seismic shift in the way that you conquer your entrepreneurial domain. So strap in and let's embark on a roller coaster ride to reclaim your life and your success. In my coaching program, we're blasting through barriers, including number one, building better boundaries, right? We're going to stop those energy vampires and establish unbreakable boundaries to fortify your work-life equilibrium. Number two, reclaim your energy, say goodbye to fatigue and hello to a turbo boost of vitality. Discover the secrets to replenishing your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy, my specific PEMS framework. And this is more than stress management, okay? We're going to wrestle stress to the ground and make it tap out. Every setback is a setup for an epic comeback. And right, you're going to become a goal-getting machine. We're going to fuse your personal and professional aspirations into a powerhouse of purpose. Say hello to a life that's not just lived, but thrived. Okay, so hold on to your hats. This is not just coaching, it's a revolution of the soul. This entrepreneurial road is not a lonely one when you've got a relentless ally like me in your corner. So it's time to crank up the volume and get ready to hustle with heart. Keep the fire alive, keep smashing those goals, and don't forget, I'm your partner in this electrifying journey. P.S. Let's flame the flames of connection. Catch up with me on the socials. You'll find my LinkedIn, my Instagram, my Facebook, and a link to my Facebook group for more exclusive content in the show notes. We'll see you there.